Howdy, I'm Jeff Green, one of our admission counselors at the Texas A&M School of Law Admissions Office. Thank you all for joining us today. Today I have with me Mark Thorne-Thomsen, who's a graduate of the law school, currently practicing law in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Wanted to hear a little bit from his perspective. So thank you for joining us today, Mark.
Yeah, sure thing. Glad to be here.
Yeah, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself, kind of a little bit of background, what led you to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my background is just a little bit unique to being a Texas Aggie. I started off my undergrad studying government, but that was at the University of Texas. So I kind of came in. I lost a couple friends along the way, jokingly, who said if I became an Aggie, we wouldn't talk. We're still best friends this day. But I did undergrad at UT, and then I took a couple years off and I worked at the state capitol. I worked for a couple state reps. I ran some campaigns. I did a little bit of sales, and then I realized it was time for me to go back to law school. So when I started applying, I looked at all the local areas and local schools around the DFW, and really Texas A&M was just the best fit for me. So right now I'm a prosecutor for the Tarrant County Criminal District Attorney's Office. It's been phenomenal. I get to be in court every day, which is exactly what I wanted. And I think A&M definitely gave me the tools in order to prepare for that.
That's great. So I know it's been a while, but thinking back to that season, after you've applied, you've gotten your decisions from schools, it's probably been 4 or 5 years, but what do you remember about making that decision of law school? You gotta make that decision and pay the deposit by the deadline. That's exactly where we're at in the season for students right now. So what do you remember about that season, and what do you remember about you making that decision, how you chose A&M?
Sure. I remember it being very tough. I remember it, it's very much not a game, but you really have to put all of the schools in certain baskets and figure out what's the best fit for you, right? So when I went back and had that conversation with myself, I said, okay, when I graduate, I want to be in an area that has a good job market, that has the things that I want to do. I want to be relatively close to home. I'm from the DFW area as well. So, but also I want a school where if I'm going to invest into this school, I want this school to also invest into me. So by that point, just to put things very clearly, I had heard back from Texas Tech. I've heard back from several out of state schools, A&M. And then really what sealed the deal is I spoke with to this day, it was Professor Casado Perez at a function for A&M. And I quickly realized that I was going to get all those things at A&M. And not just that, but at the time, A&M wasn't where it was ranked at now. But at the time, I realized, especially after meeting with several professors, other current students who were there, I realized that as soon as I graduated, my degree was going to be worth more than it was then. So not only was I getting an extremely good bang for my buck, but I was in the DFW marketplace in Fort Worth, which isn't as legally saturated as Dallas. And I was going to be getting, what turns out to be a highly ranked school on my resume. But I do remember, and if anybody's out there listening, it is a tough choice. Like, you really have to sit down and you have to ask yourself those tough questions. And if you don't like what you hear, that's a good sign. But on the flip side, if you are attracted to a lot of the things, to whatever school, for instance, when I got to A&M, I didn't realize, being as a Longhorn in undergrad, I just always kind of made fun of the Aggie mentality, right? It was like, man, these guys, they're so diehard. They're all maroon, but it really is a family, which isn't the typical feeling that you get in other law schools. It's an open door policy. Like, every professor there is there to talk. They want to meet you. They want to learn who you are. And really, I've heard, there are those stories of competition in other schools, but at A&M, it's a very healthy competition. Not only do I want my best friend and colleague to do well, but I want them to push me to do as best as I can as well. And that's really why I remember choosing A&M. And so far, it's been the best choice I could have made.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always love talking with our UT students. Like, you have this extreme advantage of being part of two of the largest networks in the world. Like, you're part of both of them, right?
Oh, yeah.
can tap into those at any time. So yeah, but obviously there's a benefit there that is unique. That's obviously a different experience, but we love hearing that. So A&M has a range of experiential learning opportunities, academic opportunities. What experiences do you think you had at A&M Law that have prepared you for what you're doing now, that you feel like you're benefiting from now as you're practicing law?
Sure. I think, well, there were several, but I think overall, it's the classes themselves. So when I was trying to figure out my law school choice, you got to realize also kind of the history of where A&M was. A&M back in the day was a night school, and so a lot of those classes were geared towards the practical application of law. So it was also the theory, don't get me wrong, but it was also this whole idea of they wanted you to graduate and be able to practice law from day one, which sounds weird, but not, which sometimes isn't a priority to law schools. They want you to learn the theories. They want you to learn the overarching intellectual ideas behind some of these legal movements. But what I really loved about A&M is, for instance, now I've had several trials. I started back in November. I graduated in May. I've had several trials, and I can tell you, not in a bragging way, but there are some of my companions who legitimately didn't get those skill sets to be able to practice in front of a judge. And I got that throughout all my courses. I remember in my evidence course, Professor Seymour, we spent 2 whole days just learning how to admit evidence into the court record. And when I talked to several of my friends who went to their law schools, they're like, especially at the DA's office, it's kind of like, all right, we didn't get that kind of exposure or learning opportunity where we said, all right, let's stop talking about case law and what the Supreme Court said. Let's figure out how to not look like a dum-dum when you're in the courtroom trying to figure out how this stuff works, right? So generally just the practical hands-on application on the actual practice of law. And A&M also has the programs to back that up too. So not only did we have that in the classroom, but I was able to transition that to the criminal defense clinic. So Professor Amber Baylor, she's phenomenal. So we essentially got clients and we were able to just run like attorneys and just essentially practice law. I got to do hearings in front of judges. I got to talk to my client, obviously. And I just got to kind of negotiate with county prosecutors on trying to, get these people some help, So I got criminal defense clinic, obviously mock trial. What I really loved about the mock trial program at A&M is the diversity of the competitions that we've got. So we've got all sorts of competitions: employment, criminal, just civil in general. And it really, even though I'm in criminal now, it was so nice to get that civil experience to say, you know what, maybe that's not for me. I know I want to be in the courtroom, but criminal's kind of where I want to end up. Lastly, really, is the ability for that that A&M gives its students, or the leeway to create their own experiences. So I'm a Spanish speaker. I've been a Spanish speaker my whole life, but I never got in trouble enough to learn what misdemeanor or class A misdemeanor, what that was in Spanish, right? I didn't know what any of these terms were. So you're already learning a new language by the sole fact of being in law school. But when I wanted to learn Spanish, I went to the dean and I said, hey, I want a course where we teach Spanish for lawyers. And in a matter of weeks, we made that happen. And I had me and 5 other Spanish speakers in my class met once a month for class credit, Spanish for lawyers. And we did awesome things like actually go out to Raíces, which is a immigration nonprofit, and actually get assigned clients and walk through U visas and all sorts of awesome stuff to try to get these people help in Spanish. So it was, like I said, it kind of goes back to the practical measure of it is, we learn in the classroom this stuff, but at the end of the day, we had professors who understood the importance of the academic success, but also that you need to be able to translate that into actual practice. So really, if you want something, you can make it happen. I was also in what you'll soon find out is like a student body organization. We call it SBA. And it's essentially the governing board of students, and they let you do whatever you want within reason, as long
Right.
as it's got an impact on the school. So I was in charge of what's called big event, and so we helped a lot. We we essentially organized the whole school to come out and volunteer on a Saturday, and that was hard for me to do as an undergrad Longhorn, try to come in and be a part of an Aggie tradition. But I'll tell you what, I've left this school now with more family than I had to begin with. So the Aggies have been extremely kind to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and that connects with why I'm here. I'm originally from Arkansas. I really didn't know what an Aggie was until college when I worked at a summer camp, and from a distance, they're singing these things and saying these things, and it's kind of odd. But then once you actually get to experience some of the traditions, it kind of makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, and you realize how deep some of these things are. So yeah, definitely connected with you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's helpful. We from our admissions officer, we often are trying to portray that practice ready lawyer that we hear about at A&M Law. But I think when I'm telling a student that, it sounds just like admissions talk. Like, oh, that's a
Right.
good marketing, good marketing spiel. But I think every grad I talk to, especially the recent grads that have that experience of like, my first day in court was this many days after I started work, and maybe they were nerves, but you were ready for it.
Oh yeah, I was in trial the second week I was at work, and my mock trial experience, and then essentially really just all my in class got me prepared to where I needed to be. And I can safely say I work with a lot of other Aggies, and they're kind of on the same level as me.
Yep, that's awesome. So just to sum it up, and some of this might be going back to something you touched on before, which is okay, but what would you, how would you answer the question of what do you love most about A&M Law?
Yeah, I think it's just the fact it's the people. I consider myself a diehard Aggie now. I have they're not my friends, they're my family. They took me to Kyle Field. I was in the maroon. It was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal experience because the people that A&M attracts, it's legitimate. It's good people. And you can go, all these admissions. And I remember the same game. They tell you all the good all the good stuff about the school, and I'd be lying to you if I told you this was not tough. Like, this is hands down the toughest thing I've ever done, is to go through law school. So ask yourself, who do you want to be surrounded by in those three years, where you're pretty much in the trenches, 14, 15, 16 hours a day, all-nighters. And I can safely tell you that the people that A&M attracts are world-class. In my class, and I know the class sizes are a little bit different now, but we had about 130, 135. I can safely say 130 of them are some of my close friends, and we still keep up. And it's crazy to see them in the courtroom. And we'll stop, and I'll say, like Kelsey Failer, for instance, I'll say, "Oh, Kelsey, what's going on? How are you?" And it's a different attitude because we are Aggies. It was just a phenomenal experience, because you think you come in and this whole ordeal is going to be competitive. And don't get me wrong, it is very competitive. But it's at A&M, the experience that they foster is this idea of leaving essentially a football field and still being able to shake your competitor's hand. And not just that, but go out, have dinner with them, hang out with them, because essentially they're family. It's been, I think that's what really drove my success now, is that I had people who were much smarter than me telling me what I was doing wrong. And it wasn't a competition. It was a lifting each other up so that we could both be competitors on game day. It was phenomenal.
That's awesome. I love to hear those stories. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mark. I appreciate it, as well as the students that are out there just trying to gather as much information as possible in this virtual settings that we're now in.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for your time. Any students that are out there, as we always say, if you have any follow-up questions, if there's anyone we can connect you with, please let us know. Mark, as well as many others, are always willing to help.
Oh, yeah.
And so please let us know in however way you want to reach out to us. Texting, emails, phone calls, even comments here. But let us know how we can help you. We want to do that. We want to help you make the right decision. We're really proud about helping students do that wherever you end up going to law school. So let us know how we can help. Thank you for joining today, and thank you again, Mark.
Thanks. Y'all have fun.